Welcome back, everybody. Before I introduce Dr. Todd, we're going to do our last round of gratitude gifts. Lindsay Saint. Is Dr. Saint here? She's not here? Okay. Lori Valentine. Okay, do you want to pick up something on her behalf? Yes, please do. Debbie Yemen? That's you? Pick up two. Charlisa Woodward. Sheila Gogula. Is Sheila still here? Yeah. Rebecca Hoffman. Daniel Conyer. Okay, great. Debbie Cantrell. Tina White. Great. Trisha Dougherty. Okay. Jessica Grimm. All right. Fantastic. So our next speaker provided me with a very entertaining bio that I am really thrilled to read to you right now. And it goes as follows. Dr. Christine Todd, my friend and colleague, has wanted to be at different points in her life the President of the United States of America, John Lennon, fluent in French, a professional bagpiper, a movie director, a mounted policewoman, and a pastry chef. Instead, she has been a telemarketer for Discover Card, the person who mucked out stalls for rich people's horses, a lab assistant and internist, and a person who hit a Nobel laureate in the head with the snowball. I would love to hear that story, Christine. She is currently chair of medical humanities and the chief wellness officer of the Center for Human and Organizational Potential, led by Dr. Sue Hingle. And without further ado, I'm going to invite Christine Todd to the stage for our last half hour together.
Time for a little levity at the end of the day. Thank you for sticking around to the bitter end. In the middle of the desert in Egypt sits the Sphinx, and the Sphinx has a riddle. The legend is that when you came across the Sphinx, which is this magnificent fantasy animal with the body of a lion and the head of a pharaoh, it asks you a question, it asks you a riddle. And if you get the riddle wrong, you are smited, killed. If you get the riddle right, the Sphinx lets you go on your way. And the riddle is this: what walks on 4 legs in the morning, on 2 legs in the afternoon, and on 3 legs in the evening? And the answer is man. Crawling, and then you walk, and then you've got a cane. I always wondered why the Sphinx had such a kind of dumb riddle, until one day when I was at the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York City, where they have a beautiful Sphinx. And I was looking at the Sphinx, and I may have had a cocktail or two. If none of you have ever tried an art museum drunk, you should try it. Things start to make more sense if you do that. In any case, in this state, I was looking at the Sphinx, and the Sphinx spoke to me and said, "Christine, do you even know what you are?" And I thought, that is what this riddle is. The Sphinx would see a man and say, "Let me ask you, do you even know what you are?" And that was the wisdom of the riddle of the Sphinx. And I realized as I was standing there in the museum, you know, I really value that question. Do you know who you are as a man? If I think there is a purpose in life, it's for each of us to figure that out. And so, of course, it's not a surprise that I became a doctor, because that's one way of trying to figure out what you are. and that I developed a real passion as a doctor for this intersection of medicine and humanities, another perspective on trying to figure out who we are. So flash forward to my sophomore year at college when I took a class in feminist theory. I was an English major. Those are the kinds of classes you take. I was not at all sure if feminist theory was like a real thing or just trendy. I didn't know what to make of it. But it was a great class, and one of the things we did in this class, after reading many scholarly articles and talking about all kinds of interesting subjects, is one day we showed up and our professor had brought paper and pencils, and she said, "I want you all to draw what it feels like to be a woman." There were a couple guys in the class. And we made fun of them, and we're like, "Yeah, Joe, how does it feel to be a woman?" And as I was laughing at Joe, I realized that I was not sure how it felt to be a woman myself. Do you even know what it is to be who you are? And when I think about that moment when I realized that I don't know how it feels to be a woman, that's like a question I have trouble answering. I realized that I think many women have this question because so many other forces and people are trying to tell us how it ought to feel to be a woman and how we ought to conduct ourselves if we are women. And so I love gatherings like today where we actually get together, women and men, I see you way back there, and kind of dwell in that and talk about that and have some fellowship and thought around that. So I am so glad to have attended this conference. But I have to tell you, for as lovely as I think it is, there are times when I attend events like this that I start to get a little angry. So when I think about the gender gap of pay differentials in the workplace and how women only make 75% of what men make, I know how I feel about that. I'm angry. When I think about the amount of emotional labor that women do in relationships and at work, as opposed to what men do, I know how I feel about that. I'm a little angry and resentful about that. When I listen to a lovely presentation about making better food choices for our families and realize that although that is a wonderful conference to give to a group of women, I don't think that seminar ever gets given to a whole bunch of male physicians. And why not? I know how I feel about that. When we have discussions about microaggressions that women face in the workplace, I know how I feel about that. I feel angry and mad. And I don't know if any of you have ever tried to take up a conversation about this in a group setting, but you get some reactions like this. "Wow, Christine, tell me how you really feel." Can I get an amen? Settle down, calm down. Don't get hysterical. These are people policing my emotions, which are legitimate emotions. And this is a trauma that our community undergoes so often that in order to avoid being traumatized, we start policing ourselves, right? So I, last year, interviewed a whole bunch of high school girls and boys, men and women, I guess girls and boys. They looked like infants to me, but they were in high school. And we were interviewing them for a program here at SIU, and the difference between how the boys conducted themselves and how the girls conducted themselves blew my mind. One boy sat down, looked at me and said, and my co-interviewer, and said, "Hello, ladies, you look lovely." He was a character. But almost every single girl that I saw interviewed like this. "Well, it might seem kind of crazy what I think about that, but you know, like, do you ever like that?" That is someone policing themselves and not coming out and saying what they really think. So Our community polices us until we begin to police ourselves into silence. And I want to talk a little bit about what we can do to have conversations about pay inequalities, have discussions about disparities in health outcomes of men as opposed to women, how we can begin talking about the emotional labor that goes in at home and at the workplace, and have those discussions that are uncomfortable and emotional, but have them courageously and be able to discharge the trauma that it triggers so that we can be resilient and go on about our business and go on being our best selves after having had conversations like that. All right, so the first thing I'm going to talk to you about is not giving away your power. And this is a great opportunity for us all to become allies for each other. So how many of you have stubbed your toe on a leg of a table and apologized to the table? How many of you have done that? Raise your hand high. You should be proud of this. How many of you catch yourselves apologizing for things like, why did I say, there's nobody in this room. Why did I say I'm sorry? Why did I just apologize for that? Women apologize a lot for things that they don't need to apologize for. Is there another phrase that we could use, or is there an editor we can turn on in our brain so that we stop saying, I'm sorry? Even if we said, excuse me, that might be a little bit different. Okay. The other thing that we could probably stop doing is coaching our students and the people that we work with when they talk like this. Have any of you have daughters, students who talk like this? Anybody notice this phenomenon? Up talking. Yeah. Everything's a question. That means you're not sure about any darn thing you say, because every single phrase that comes out of your mouth is phrased as a question. This is a particular young person thing, and I think that is a great place for those of you who are mentoring younger people to say, can we talk about this verbal tic that you have, because it's not going to do you any good. Stop asking everything as a question and just say it. It takes some practice, but people can be broken of the habit. When you hear one of your colleagues apologize and they didn't need to, you can point it out to them. Hey, you don't need to apologize for that. No apology necessary. And finally, we tend to let people take our strengths and turn it into our weakness. So I'll give you an example of what I mean about that from my own life. So one of the most common feedback comments that I got as a kid and all the way through medical school was that I was intimidating and I came across as unfriendly. So what did I do with that feedback? I tried to kind of dumb it down a little bit. I stopped using the $5 words that I love to use and started eliminating them in the same way that I try to eliminate jargon when I talk to patients. I started making a lot of self-deprecating jokes, like, hey, I am making fun of me, so you can make fun of me, and I'm friendly, see? And I was doing that when I was a resident, dumbing it down and making fun of myself at every chance I could because I didn't want to be intimidating or unfriendly. And my friend Gary, who was, and still is, a brilliant gay doctor, HIV specialist, said, Christine, what are you doing? He said it in the middle of rounds in front of everybody. He's like, what are you doing? I'm doing my shtick, Gary, like, don't get in my way. I'm trying to show my attendings and my interns that I'm not intimidating and that I'm friendly. And he said, who told you you were intimidating and unfriendly? And I'm like, that's kind of what people say. And he's like, you don't come off that way. You come off as intelligent. When people tell you that that is intimidating and unfriendly, it is because your intelligence is intimidating them and scaring them. That's their problem and not yours, because doctors are supposed to be intelligent. I let the community that was policing the way I presented myself turn my strength into a weakness. And I think it's a good idea for all of us to reflect on some of the negative feedback we've gotten and think about whether that might be a hint at what our superpower is. Because if I have a superpower, it's that I'm smart. I don't have any like extraordinary superpowers, but I know that is one of mine, and I let people tell me that that was bad to show that it's not bad. It's powerful. That's why people tried to like press it down. But if I want to be powerful in my community, then I need to lift that up, not let people press that down. So as you guys are reflecting on your dailyo and in your journeys and all that stuff tonight, I want you to think about that. What is the negative criticism that you have gotten that might be a clue as to what your superpower really is? If we don't give away our power and we decide we're going to use it to have some of those uncomfortable conversations with our boss about our pay or at work about a disparity that we would like to remedy, et cetera, then we have to realize that we're going to have uncomfortable conversations and not shy away from that. And I believe it's only human nature to shy away from a situation that's going to give you that negative emotion, right? So I want to work with you on a couple exercises we can do to metabolize and discharge that negative energy. Because if we know that we can process it and get rid of it once we feel it, then we're not so afraid of going there and having that tough conversation and facing it. Because we know, okay, after this is done, I'm going to be able to process it and change gears, code switch, however you want to say it, and go on to my next thing and not bring it home to my family or not bring it into the next patient's room. So this is, I think, an important thing for women to think about, because a lot of the ways that men discharge negative emotions are not sort of culturally open as much to women. So give me some examples. How do men discharge negative emotional energy? When men aren't feeling good, what do? Pick a fight with somebody? You've all seen this happen, right? It gets tense and then, yep. Physical altercations, fighting, what else do they do? What? Yeah, men can yell. When I start yelling, people are like, because I might cry next, and that is like very, 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 very tough for people to handle. So yeah, they can raise their voice, they can yell, they engage in sports where there is some like physical altercation involved. Can women do that? I mean, we can, we're physically capable of doing those things, but it's unladylike, it's not demure, right? It puts people off. And so some of those ways of discharging that emotion feel free, but I think we have been kind of trained that, women kind of like don't go there. So what are some ways that we can do it? So I'm going to talk about those two things. So the first practice we're going to do is something called Tonglen, and this comes from the Buddhist tradition. And I feel this is a very helpful technique to use when you have had to absorb a lot of badness that you can't necessarily do anything about, that negative emotion, which I think really contributes to burnout. So, when I've watched CNN for a little bit too long, sometimes I need to use this tactic. When I've been on service and I've been up close and personal with the social and political determinants of health, and I'm like, there is so much poverty and inequity and unfairness out there that I have just had to take on in working with my patients. I am in a bad place. Negative emotions are us right here. What can you do? I can't solve poverty and inequities like that. Even if I just take it by patient, I still can't do it. So when faced with things like this, Pema Chodron, a Buddhist teacher, talks about the practice of Tonglen. When you think about all the hopeless, bad situation, and then you think about what is the utopia? If this didn't exist, if this was all resolved, what would the situation look like? If we didn't have poverty in the US and disparities, what would my life as a physician be like? Imagine that. And then you breathe in all the bad stuff and you breathe out into the world this positive imagery. And that is what you offer these situations where you don't have a fix that you can offer concretely. Okay? So it's kind of like a deep cleansing breath, but it's with that imagery. So let's stand up. That's a superpower. I can command a group of, okay, everybody stand up. All right. And now I want you to think about a situation that you can't fix that does distress you. Something in your world, it could be your family or work. It doesn't have to be a global thing. Think about it. And now I want you to think, if that problem was resolved, what would it look like? How would you feel? If you're thinking about a person and their problems, how would they look if they no longer had that burden? What would it be like to be an attending in the hospital if we didn't have so much poverty and inequity? Think about it. Visualize the hope for that. And now, when we breathe in, we're going to take a deep breath in. You're going to breathe in all the badness. We're going to hold it, and then we're going to breathe out, and we're going to breathe out that positive hope for the world. Okay? So, deep breath in, suck in all that bad stuff, and hold it, and now breathe out that positive hope into the world. One more time. Breathe in the bad stuff, suck it all up. And now breathe out your hope for something better in the world. Okay, so that is the practice of Tonglen. It takes a minute. It's a deep cleansing breath to put you in a more positive mindset. That can be helpful. All right, sit back down. And now we're going to talk a little bit about a practice that you can use when you have had the courage to have one of those uncomfortable conversations, and now you're kind of jangly because you're like, oh, the adrenaline's running because you were uncomfortable. You had to work up the courage to like say something in a meeting where you kind of called something out at your institution or something like that. So you're kind of jangly and you don't know what to do. Okay, so in the past, what I would do is I would eat something because that's how I squelch my emotions. That's my brand of squelching emotions, is like, what is in the vending machine? Oh, Snickers, that is awesome. I will do that, and you know, like the tough thing about using food to self-medicate is extremely effective. I would feel better, but I did not want to continue solving my negative emotions in that way. That wasn't a healthy way to do it. And so in my search for healthier ways to do it, I came across a great book that I suggest to all of you called My Grandmother's Hands, written by a man named Resmaa Menakem. You can get it on Amazon. And the great thing about this book is it talks about different ways that communities are traumatized and get involved in negative emotions, but then it gives some concrete physical guided imageries and physical exercises that you can do to metabolize that stuff. So if you work with a population that is traumatized, or has to deal with a lot of negative emotion, the exercises and the examples in this book are very helpful. And this is his sort of step method as one way to do this. So, first of all, when you have an uncomfortable conversation, realize it's not a fight, but it's one group's set of traumas and dysfunction meeting another group's set of traumas and dysfunctions. Have some compassion for yourself in bringing something to the table, and have some compassion that the person's reaction may be coming from what they have experienced. So attend to these discussions in this mindset of We kind of have trauma meeting trauma, and that can be difficult. Second of all, imagine yourself in your, what he calls, strength palace. Can you imagine a place on the face of this earth where you feel rooted and grounded and powerful? It might be your childhood home. It might be an amazing place you saw on vacation where you just felt very powerful. It might be a particular landscape that kind of calls to your genetic roots. I'm half Japanese and half Irish, English, Scottish, and so the idea of standing on the shoreline of an island with the seas, that really, there's something about that. I feel very powerful if I imagine myself in that strength palace. So spend a moment imagining yourself there before you have this uncomfortable conversation. Remember your power and who you are. Thirdly, he says, remember, you're just talking. You're just talking, and it's okay to talk. Not everybody has to feel great with every conversation that they have. It's okay. Whether you interpret this as just sort of life is ephemeral, or whether you interpret this as, you have to talk about it and the best disinfectant and sunshine, whatever works for you, but we're just talking. This is, in some respect, ephemeral. My boyfriend's niece said something very interesting last summer. She was sitting at the dining room table, and her grandma came in and looked at herself in the mirror and said, I'm tan from the sun. I'm tan from the sun. And she said, I'm Fiona from planet Earth. And I'm like, this child has a perspective that is crazy. But then I remembered when I was a little kid and I would write my brother at summer camp or whatever, sometimes I would say, Christine Todd, Chicago, Illinois, USA, Earth, Milky Way, universe. Like, I would write that on the envelope because I'm like, let's just really situate myself. And when you situate yourself like that, you start to realize, okay, this is, in the grand scheme of things, little. It's okay to talk about. It's okay to feel uncomfortable for a little while. And then finally, he says, after you have this discussion, you have to discharge the negative physical energy. And so, if any of you have had any moments of discomfort in talking about these things, thinking, gee, I need to do a little better at work, or gee, there's a lot to work on, and kind of having some of that anxiety, we are going to have a session here to end this afternoon where we discharge that negative physical energy and leave here with some joy. So if any of you here at SIU see me walking around campus, that's what I'm doing. I'm discharging negative energy by physically walking. Walk it off. You got to do something physical. I'm not going to get into a fight. I'm not really a sports person. I could yell, but that would distress people. So if you see me walking around the block like I'm kind of angry, that is what I'm doing. I'm walking around the block because I'm kind of angry. But even better is if we dance. So can we all stand up? And I'm going to ask our DJ to hit it. And we're going to dance, folks. We're going to dance off any negative energy that you have. I'm not going to stand on stage.
Thank you so much, Dr. Todd. That was really uplifting. One more round of applause. I would like to thank every one of our speakers, Dr. Todd, Dr. Smith, Dr. Sattovia, Dr. Palamara, Dr. Dewey, for really a phenomenal conference today. A huge round of applause. Many thanks again to my fabulous planning committee, many of whom are sitting at this table, for really helping to bring this event to life. Many thanks to our colleagues at the Office of Continuing Professional Development and the MCLI for their invaluable efforts as well. I'm coming away from this conference uplifted, as I just told Dr. Todd. I'm also walking away with knowledge, more tools to enhance the culture of wellness in my personal and professional worlds. But most importantly, I'm walking away from here with strength and hope. And I really hope that you all are walking away with that as well. My heartfelt thanks to each and every one of you for attending today and for going on this incredible journey with us. We are all in this together, so thank you. A couple of more housekeeping items. Dr. Dewey, for her small group session, had a small audience response clicker that she had everybody take. She's missing 2, so if anybody has one, if there's any floating out there, please bring it up to this front table. I would finally like to end by thanking our artists from the Springfield Art Association. Marianne Stremsturfer and Patricia Braun, please, on your way out, come to the front, your front right of the room for the big reveal of our collective art piece that we essentially put together and that they compiled into a masterpiece here. Thank you. I hope you all have a wonderful and restful and relaxing and peaceful weekend. Thank you.